Good evening, I'm Shamata Rahman and you're watching Analyze. Today we're joined in our studio by the USAID Pakistan Mission Director, Mr. Gregory Gottlieb. Good evening, thank you very much for taking out the time.
Thanks for having me.
The reason I appreciate you coming on this show, and I want to tell the audience this before we go ahead and start with the rapid fire, is simply this, that USAID for a long time now has been doing a lot of work in Pakistan, trying, whether it's humanitarian assistance or whether it's in the energy sector, whether it's education. But very often it seems that the kind of work that is being done is not viewed in its total, how would I say, importance. And there is also this perception or misperception that perhaps the money is not being channeled towards the sectors that it really should be. And perhaps it is not channeled and put out there in a very transparent manner. There's a lot of question marks when it comes to the role that USAID is playing in Pakistan. And what I'd like to tell the audience is that what we would like to do is start with a basic overview of what it is exactly USAID's primary focus is.
Well, thanks for having me on the show. Appreciate it a lot. It's a great chance for us to, I think, explain what we do here in Pakistan. You know, USAID's about over 50 years old, so we've been in Pakistan many years. So we hope that at least some people know us well, and we hope that maybe after this interview they'll know us a little bit better. So we're in 5 sectors in Pakistan. Energy is one of our main sectors, and the reason it's the main sector is because this is the government's main sector, whether that was the previous government or the current government. We've heard that from them. As you know, we've just recently concluded an energy dialogue in Washington. In fact, just a couple weeks ago, another group came to look at the gas sector. Obviously, Pakistan's trying to develop its liquefied natural gas sector, so they came to Houston to take a look at how we do things there, and we'll help the government with that. So energy is very big. Everybody knows it. Everybody's got experiencing load shedding. Even I experience load shedding. And I think everybody knows that if the country is to progress, if the economy is to grow, if we're to do a lot of different things in Pakistan, we're going to need adequate energy. And that energy has to grow to keep up with population and an increasingly educated population. But besides that, we also have programs in health. Mainly in health. It's our largest mother and child health program in the world. The social statistics here for mothers and children is not very good, and so the program we feel is well directed. Obviously, this is an issue now with the 18th Amendment where we deal with the province.
It's now a provincial subject.
It's a provincial subject.
Federal, so you're dealing with various provincial governments
now. But we also, I can say very frankly, we get a lot of good support from the federal government. In particular, I think the Minister of Planning, Mr. Iqbal, is a very strong partner for us. He speaks, as you know, he speaks out on these issues that are important for Pakistan, for all of Pakistan, really. But so we deal at the provincial level, and that has its own complications, but it also has its advantages because there's a focus at the provincial levels on certain sort of key issues. For instance, in Sindh, the issue of conditions of schools. So we've got a program in Sindh to build 120, either rebuild or build new 120 schools to allow kids to have the kind of place that will enable them to really fulfill their educational goals. And so in health, mother and child health, we're also in Sindh. We will be in, we work in KP and we work in Punjab.
So there's energy and then there's health. What are the other 3?
Well, the other ones that are there are economic growth. So we've had pretty substantial programs in, a lot of it been targeted at really sort of micro enterprises. We've been doing that for about the last 5 years. So for instance, one of the things we've really looked at is the mango sector. Everybody knows that Pakistan has the best mangoes in the world. So that fruit needs to get out into the world and be traded and to bring cash back to Pakistan. So we've been working with that sector to help modernize it. The mangoes are fine. It's how you process them. It's how you package them. It's how you prepare them for export. So since we started that program about 4 years ago, I think exports have gone from roughly around 2-3 million up to over 12 million now. And while that's not huge in terms of the international mango market, what it's doing is it's opening markets. So that's the kind of things we have. We are moving that program forward into things like investment funds for small and medium enterprises, which we can talk about a little bit later. And besides that, so I've looked at those 4 sectors, and the last sector we have is a sector that focuses on sort of recovery efforts and development efforts in KP Fata.
Okay.
Obviously, there's been a lot of violence up there that's affected the populations. So our programs are really designed at a couple things. One is to help those communities recover from the violence, and some of that includes maybe it's rebuilding a school that's been damaged. Maybe it's putting in a small water system in a village. It can also be things like roads. We've put in almost 700 kilometers of new roads in South Waziristan. Gomozam Dam, which has brought 18 megawatts of power to the area, and almost 50 villages now have been electrified. So it comes from the small, the individualized, to the much larger. But we think it's that kind of programming, that combination of village level, community level, coupled with infrastructure that will help KP Fata move beyond the violence.
If we were to talk about the entire annual budget that USAID has, if you could mention the budget historically, let's say over the last 5 years, annually what it's been, what it is projected for this year, 2014, and which areas is it being divided into? Okay.
Well, we're still working on our 2013 budget right now, actually. But the 2013 budget for USAID is $723 million. So since 2009, we've spent about $4 billion in development aid, which is, we are the second largest USAID program in the world. Only Afghanistan's larger than we are. Before that, we've been anywhere from, I believe in 2010, we were at about 1.4 billion. And that budget's come down to about 723. But we've still got, we have a substantial amount of money still to be programmed and moved through the system. And so this year is a pretty robust budget. And it's really divided around 60, I'd say 60, 65% go between energy and the work in Fata KP. And then the rest is split up between health, education, and economic growth. So that's kind of how we divide it.
Okay, another thing I'd like to ask, I mean, what is the process? Because I'm sure you have to submit a year in advance or 6 months in advance, what the projections for the next year are. And then the budget is, you know, vetted, and then the money is slowly released. I believe about 2 or 3 years ago, because the reason I'm mentioning this is because about 2 or 3 years ago, there was a need to put in more money into the energy sector. So the money had to then be diverted from education funds or whatever there were towards the energy. What is the process of submitting this budget? How is it vetted? And then how soon are the funds released?
Well, the way it works back home is we work with USAID Washington and we work with our State Department colleagues to develop a budget for a particular year, so for FY13, for instance. And we propose the sectors that we're going to work in. I mean, usually you don't just, on a program this big, you develop a strategy, first of all, and you decide on what sectors you're going to work in, because any development program, nothing happens overnight, whether you're going to add a turbine to Mongla Dam or you're going to do mother and child health. So you have to look outward in terms of anything that we're going to do. So we develop a strategy, we agree on the sectors that we're going to work on, and then every year what we do is we get our money, of course, from Congress. Congress authorizes what we get. So we submit our budget to Congress, the President does, and the Congress debates with the administration, and then we decide what the budget's going to be, and then we get notified of that, and then we begin to do the paperwork that's necessary to move that money. I think the one good thing about the American system is that it's pretty open. When we go up to testify on Capitol Hill about our budget, when our administrator does, and which he will do shortly on the 14 budget, it's a public hearing. You know, anybody can go hear what the administrator and the Secretary of State are talking about in terms of what we're going to do. So it's a very open process. And I can add that what makes, I think, the process very open here It's not just the budgeting process, which I think is pretty open, but it's the implementation process, because we have our Inspector General resident here with us. So every U.S. government office has an Inspector General, which is an independent agency. Well, every one of our programs is audited by our Inspector General. Everyone has been. And those reports are online. So anytime our Inspector General wants to comment on, say, a mistake that we've made in our regulations or something, it's online for anybody to see, which is, I think, really makes it possible for Pakistanis to see the way that we go about not just how we get our money, but how we run the program, who we're running it with, who are the partners. It's all in those reports.
There is something I'd like to quote, which I found a little surprising. The BISP, the Benazir Income Support Program, was largely funded by USAID. And when, I was talking about transparency, and when an independent auditor actually audited, they found surprisingly that I think 97% or 96% of the people who were asked this question as to whether they were satisfied with the program. Now, for me, I mean, that's great for you to hear, but for me as a journalist, 97% of, this is Pakistan. I mean, I'm not criticizing my own country, but in any country, a 97% success rate in terms of, non-corruption, I just find that hard to digest.
Well, yeah, I think if I can say, the way that we go about really looking at our programs here, besides a full-time Inspector General's office, I think what's important is the way that we approach this. So with the Benazir Fund, I wasn't here when we put our funding in there. But yes, we use independent auditors for all of our programs, really. There's no other way to really do that. We do about 35% of all our funding goes directly to government, Pakistan government. But we do a fairly thorough financial check of the systems before we spend our money. We do other systems that we think allow us to have a great deal of confidence that the money that we're spending is getting spent right, and that Pakistanis are getting the products they want. I'll give you a good example.
Sure.
So here's the way we build a road or we build a dam. We work a lot with Frontier Works Organization. We found them to be a very efficient, very effective organization, particularly working under difficult circumstances in Fateh, KP area. So when they go to build a road for us, for instance, we don't just hand over all the money and say, hey, go ahead, go to it. What we do is we pay in increments. So we say, okay, you're going to build these 10 kilometers of roads, so they build those 10 kilometers of roads. Then we send an engineering firm out. We send another engineering firm out. We'll send 3 engineering firms out, all of them looking at the road to see whether the materials were right, the construction was correct, and then we pay against that those engineering reports. And we do that project by project. Takes a little bit longer to do that, but what it does is it protects us and it protects the government, because the government can show, hey, we did our job right, the engineering reports confirm it. So yes, we have to do that. I mean, it's with any government that's spending taxpayer money, you've got to show people are getting value for their money. It is taxpayer money. I
was going to come to that question, and I want to come to the energy sector as well, but let me start with this question. Is there not a severe amount of resistance, given that, I mean, it's not just something that is limited to the United States of America. Globally, there is a recession that's going on right now. And like you said, it's taxpayers' money. Right. So when this money is either coming to Pakistan or Afghanistan, there is resistance to this, isn't there?
Well, I think that in fact, the Congress and the U.S. Taxpayer has been incredibly generous in the way that we have financed our overseas development. Before I came here, I was the deputy for food security, which was a new initiative by President Obama. This came about after the spike in food prices back in 2007, 2008. The point is, even as a recession hit, the administration invested in what was considered by them and by many to be one of the most vital issues in the world, which is food security. And from what I've seen, yes, budgets go up and they go down. But I think there's a very strong commitment by the American taxpayer, by this administration, and by the Congress to foreign development, realizing that not only is it good, we hope, for the countries in which we work, but
it generates goodwill.
It generates
that
goodwill.
idea is that it will generate goodwill.
But it generates business as well. For instance, you know, the more that Pakistan develops as an economy, I mean, we're already Pakistan's largest trading partner, the U.S. So the more that we can develop that trade, the better it is for all of us. And so it's not completely altruistic, but it is, by and large, I think, there's a long history of this in the U.S. And I think you'll see, if you look at the polls, you'll see there's pretty strong support across the aisle, even in Congress, for what we do.
Okay, 60% of the budget, you said, is used for energy or then towards FATA and KPK.
Right.
So what are you doing in the energy sector that is going to make such a big difference in Pakistan?
Right. Well, the program is really split kind of in two parts.
Okay.
So let me deal with the one that I think is probably a bit more complex, and that is the side that deals with policy and efficiency. You have to be blunt and say it's not a very efficient energy system. There's a lot of leakage in the system. Load shedding enough tells you that there's plenty going on. There's not enough energy there. But that it's our feeling there's a couple things that we can do. First of all, we work very closely with the distribution companies, so all 9 of the distribution companies.
Okay.
So you take a look at those and you see, well, what is inefficient in that city, in those companies? And what's inefficient in the system, in part, is because one of the things we looked at was system didn't have any way to figure out what the loads were. It had no computerized metering system. What would happen is once an area of town began to overuse, you just blew out your system, and then you had to go repair your system, and that's how you knew you were overloaded. What we've done is install basically meters to measure the load. And that way, if you were to go, say, to ESCO or FESCO or LESCO and take a look at, now what you see is a computerized control room. And they can monitor throughout their areas what's being used. So we want to look at what's the efficiency. At least you can schedule load shedding now. Okay, there's still load shedding. But what you can do is you can meter at the household, which is a process that's beginning to start, so that if somebody's using their energy, you can measure that much more efficiently now than you could. You can have a meter that's relatively
So the first step is efficiency?
Efficiency.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's the second part?
Second part is building more capacity. So Mangla Dam, for instance. So we're going to add new turbines to Mangla Dam. That was just cleared. New turbines will give increased energy, a longer life with new turbines. Gomazam Dam, Satpara Dam. Both of those are new. They're both in more isolated areas, but they provide the kind of power that's needed. So far, I think since 2009, when we started this program, I think we've provided almost 1,100 megawatts of power, and by the end of this year, it'll be about 1,400. And we're looking out to the future, hopefully an additional 2,000 megawatts by the end of 15, and then another 4,500.
And you're saying that you're hoping that it'll be approximately 1,400 to 1,500 megawatts by the end of this year, and
That's
you're looking to add on another 2,000 next year?
Well, it'll go up to 2,000.
It'll go up
so
to
another
2,000.
600, and then about another 500 or 600 after that.
Okay.
So each time we do that, that's it's a substantial amount of power that needs to come into the system. Obviously, there's a lot going on with many donors and many companies to increase that. But so we look at it from two sides, and we want to keep working on the efficiency side, so that we don't lag behind in terms of creating more megawatts. Because if you create more megawatts, but you're not collecting the fees, it's kind of pointless. Or if you're not reducing the cost of the energy, the government is still going in the hole. It's still not producing it at the cost it needs to. And that's one of the things government's working on, and that we are going to try to help government with as well. How to continue to increase efficiency, how to develop new sources. We've got one of our sister organizations, OPIC, Overseas Private Investment Corporations, working on we hope will be a wind project that we can go in with them on. to try to develop that kind of power source. So alternative energy, efficiency, more megawatts.
Okay. What, aside from putting in the meters, as you mentioned, what else have you done to increase the efficiency? Training programs, perhaps?
Yeah.
You've done those?
Well, you know, this might seem like a small thing, but actually, one of the training programs we've had is for the men who actually maintain the systems. So Pakistan usually loses about 1 lineman a day because of not, you know, being undertrained, under-equipped. So one of the things we've tried to focus on is efficiency. And I was talking to the head of the Peshawar of PESCO, who said that in the past year since we've trained people, they've not lost 1 person. So none of the guys that have been trained have been killed on the job. So you look at that and you say, well, that's good, they didn't die. But the important part is now you have better trained people to maintain the system. You're not losing your trained people, you're keeping them, they're staying on the job. We've provided, you know, more equipment for them to maintain it. We've modernized the equipment that allows them to fix the lines faster. So we've done a lot of that. We're also working on the policy side. We're working with NEPRA in terms of having a more transparent system that will enable tariffs to be set in a way that everybody understands and are clear on. So energy takes a very, you know, we've taken a very broad look at energy.
And energy is a sector that you're saying the primary focus. I mean, 60% is a lot of the entire budget that USAID has.
It's really 35%.
Well, 35%. Yeah. So that is something that you will continue to do in the next few years.
For the foreseeable future.
For the foreseeable future, energy is going to be the main thrust.
Yeah, I think energy will continue for us to be the major part of our program. I mean, these are our discussions with government, so we want to make sure that we're in sync with what government is interested in.
Well, we have to go towards a short break, and when we come back, we'll cover
the
different things. But what I would like to add before we go to break is when we come back, I'd like to ask what problems USAID faces when it's dealing with Pakistani government officials or vice versa. Keep watching. See you after a short break. Welcome back. We're discussing the role that USAID is playing in certain key fundamental sectors in Pakistan. And before we went towards break, I was asking the mission director very simply that because they work so closely with their government, what are the problems that they encounter? What are they? I'm sure there must be some.
Oh, none.
None?
No.
None whatsoever.
I will say that being a bureaucrat myself, there's always problems working with government. I would say one of the things, I can give you an example, I think one of the challenges we've had, particularly given the 18th Amendment, is that we've switched on a lot of our programs from engaging with the federal government to engaging with provincial governments. And so, for instance, in Sindh, we've had quite a turnover of personnel in education.
Okay.
I think that has an impact on, your ability to kind of move quickly through projects. It isn't that the people that we work with aren't dedicated and prepared to do their jobs. It's that if you have a frequent change, it just, the next person has to come up to speed and get ready for their, and get familiar with the portfolio. I think that's one of the challenges. We've also, you know, we've talked with many different parts of the government about training. So oftentimes government has acknowledged that it could use more trained personnel. I mentioned earlier the issue of working with, say, the discos on their personnel. Obviously, I mean, it was a problem for them to maintain their system, so we do training. Likewise, we've done all kinds of other training for people. I mean, we have, besides the kinds of things we do, like Fulbright scholarships, sending people off through university educations, we do a lot of training, particularly around some of our programs.
Has the government mentioned the problems that it's facing with USAID?
Well, I think, you know, in terms of specifics, I haven't heard the government say that they have a problem with us. Mm-hmm. I think if there's any problem that governments probably have with donors is that our, as we talked about earlier, You know, our requirements are, particularly our financial requirements, are quite substantial because it's taxpayer money and we need to monitor it. So we do have a lot of requirements in terms of government for reporting on the funding that we give them, just as we do with our partners if they're a private sector partner. You know, same kind of requirements. But we actually have a very good working relationship with our government partners. I think, in particular, of late in FATA KP, we've been able to that provincial government has been very open in its development planning, which has involved us and other donors. We take that to heart. We think that's been very helpful for us. The more open the process is, of course, the easier it is for us to decide where we want to put our money, because we have that open dialogue with them.
Okay. Speaking of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and FATA, you said that a lot of USAID work is focused on development in these sectors. Is that also focusing on rehabilitation?
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, just from the simple thing like in Peshawar to working on water systems there, water and sewer, I mean, just some of those basics to, as I mentioned before, roads. In fact, we're working on the road that takes from Peshawar up to the Torkham, up to the border. And likewise, we're working on a lot of roads that connect all the border posts to the north-south roads, so we're trying to improve trade that way. But as I said, there's a part of our program that's very focused on the community. You want to make sure, I think, good development is can be very big and can be very small and be equally as effective. You know, when we work in a community to revive a water pump, or when we rebuild a school, you know, that community benefits directly, and we know that they appreciate what we've done, and they appreciate what government has done partnering with us to try to bring services. So that's been a big part of what we've done. The whole Gomalzam, to finally finish Gomalzam Dam,
right,
and connect that with a new road that is allowing farmers in that area, which there'll be 200,000 new acres of land irrigated. That's going to make a huge difference in that community. But it's not just a difference at the macro level, but it's the micro level. It's the micro level that makes the difference. It's the farmer, instead of taking 12 hours to get their produce to market, where the produce is half spoiled, now they'll be to market in half that time.
Are you focusing on Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and FATA because of the socio-economic factors within that region as compared to the rest of the provinces in Pakistan, or is it because it is one of the areas which has been directly hit because of the war on terror?
Well, both, really. I mean, obviously it's been a place that's been underserved, so it's a good place to do development. But the war on terror, or as I say, I mean, the effects of terror on Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and on FATA are extreme. And so it makes sense to have a program that's in a place where people are affected by war. I mentioned to you before we went on the air that I've spent most of my career in Usaid doing emergencies. So I've worked in most of the major conflicts in the last 25 years for Usaid. And it's nothing new for Usaid to be involved with communities affected by conflict. We have a long-standing history of doing this. So I think we know how to do it well, but it's also the right thing to do, to help people recover from something that afflicts them like that.
Aside from the recovery and the relief efforts that are going on currently in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, you also mentioned that one part of your program here in Pakistan, which is extremely important to USAID, and I think to anyone who's Pakistani or I think any citizen, is the Mother and Child Health Program. Now, what is the outreach of this program?
Right. Well, you know, if I can, there's a recent report that USAID helped launch, the Demographic Health Survey, and of course in that survey it showed that about 44% of children in Pakistan are malnourished. That's a pretty astounding number, actually, and it's one of the highest in the world. So a mother and child health care program, which reaches out to, I think, around, we'll probably reach about 4 million people with our program. But what you're trying to do is at the household level, you're trying to improve the health of the mother before they have a child, and afterwards when they have a child, to help with that prenatal and postnatal care that's so important, to make sure that the mother is using the best practices to feed their child and take care of their child. If you look at the vaccination rate in the country, the number of kids who have been fully vaccinated is also well below what it should be. So it's trying to encourage mothers to get their kids vaccinated, fully vaccinated against diseases that they shouldn't get sick from. So the program has huge outreach, and part of it is we've had a lot of success over the years with MCH programs. Afghanistan has seen a huge drop in the number of mothers dying from problems from birth and from children dying within the first week or month after their birth. And that's one of the things we want to try to do with our program here, is to help Pakistan achieve the kinds of targets it really wants to achieve under the MDGs. There is a ways to go on this, but we feel like we've got some very good partners at the provincial level who recognize the issues and want to deal with those issues.
I'd like to come to a question which is slightly off what we're discussing, because you mentioned malnutrition. From what the research that I've done, what I've managed to find out is that the worst malnutrition rate for children is actually in Tharparkar, where you're currently having the drought and the famine. Now, when a situation like this comes up, which I don't think you had factored into your program for last year, does USAID step in and do something, or do they have to wait for the government to first declare it an emergency, or come forward and ask you for relief or help? How does that?
Well, if it's an emergency, if the government chooses to declare an emergency, then it's at that point that we step in. We don't come into a country with our emergency relief until there's been a declaration of help. Basically, it's just saying, this is beyond our capacities. Can you help us? As it turns out, in Tharparkar, I believe World Food Program is there, and the U.S. is the largest supporter of World Food Program. So, when I look at Tharparkar, it is tragic. But I think what's important to understand is that with a malnutrition rate of 44%, there's tragedy going on in many other places as well. So I think it's important to recognize the extent of that issue, and it's one that certainly, as I mentioned, the Minister of Planning, who I think has been a real
Minister Ahsan Iqbal.
Mr. Ahsan Iqbal, who's been a real supporter on this, and others as well. I mean, the Prime Minister himself went down to Tharparkar. That's very positive. It's positive when the leader of the country highlights an issue like that. So we hope that by the senior leadership of the country doing that, it casts a light on the issue and will allow us and other donors and the government to do the work I think it wants to. I mean, the government has been, if you look at the WFP feeding programs, it's the government that supplies the food. And we supply the cash to get it milled and get the food fortified. So, I want to give the government full marks here for participating in these feeding programs, because they are. It's just we're going to have to extend the types of programs and pay attention to what kids are taking in terms of their nutrition.
What are the projects that are in the pipeline right now that we can expect to see over the next few years? I would say few years. I wouldn't even just say 1 year, because certain projects take years in planning.
Yeah, they do. Well, I think one of the things that's for us is very exciting is a new program that's we're just rolling out, and that is we're putting together 3 private investment funds. It's the first time we've ever done that in USAID.
You're putting together 3 private investment funds?
We have 3 private firms that we work with.
Okay.
Each of them will put up around $25 million, and we'll put up about $25 million. And we'll create an investment fund for small and medium enterprises in Pakistan. It's the first time we've ever done this.
And these are investors who are partnering with you who are Pakistani?
Abraj Capital, for instance,
okay,
which is out of, I think it must
it's
be.
It's based out of Dubai.
That's right. But Abraj Capital, JS Investments, which is part of Siddiqui, JS Bank. So we're partnering with them to develop ways for them to find investments in the small and medium enterprises. Why would we do that? Because small and medium enterprises generate more jobs than any other sector in the economy. And it's our view that if we can find good companies to invest in, we can increase their increase their income and create jobs and create income for Pakistan.
Is this something similar to what the Acumen Fund is doing?
I'm not sure I know that.
Well, it's basically, it's a very well-known fund in Pakistan. It's basically a fund that looks at these small, medium enterprises and tries to help facilitate them. So I figured
it could be, but this is, this is built on a real private sector model, which is what you would do if you were a hedge fund in, New York City or London, except you're targeting the small and medium enterprise.
So the first thing you said, which we can expect in the near future, is the setting up of 3 private.
That's right.
That's one. Which is the partnership between USAID and Pakistani or Pakistan-related businessmen. What else can we expect?
Well, you'll probably see us looking at some new things in energy. What else we can do in the power sector. We'll continue to look for new things there. We would, as I mentioned, we'll look to see what we could do perhaps to expand our work in nutrition with government's assistance. We'll see what we can do there.
Specifically, what are you looking to do in the energy sector?
Well, we're going to look at, we're thinking about what more we could add in terms of megawatts. We've got as I mentioned earlier, we're looking to see what we can do in alternative energy, partnering with OPIC, our Overseas Private Investment Company, on wind. We've been talking to the government about assistance in the LNG sector. That was a major part of the conversation in Washington recently. So we're taking a look at that as well. And in education, just coming online now is work with several universities on centers of excellence, like in agriculture and business and technology, to build up centers of excellence for to put ideas into the mainstream to improve economic growth and efficiencies. So that's another one that we're looking out to get going and get moving, working with the Higher Education Council on that. So there's some very interesting, I think, programs that are coming online. And, there are programs that are still sort of rolling out over time that have been on the books and we've asked about for a while. Ketu Ware is another one to work on that, to provide both irrigation and power. So it's a variety of things that we're looking at that will carry us, because each of these programs are, even putting, turbines into Mongol will take you, that's a couple of years. So everything takes a little bit of time to roll out.
Okay, well, my final question is, because we're out of time, my final question to you would be, do you feel sometimes that USAID is perhaps not given the what's the word? The acknowledgement that it should receive? And do you also feel that sometimes you are viewed suspiciously in the work that you're doing? Do you get this feeling?
Well, I'll tell you, I read about that suspicion of us, but I'll tell you, I was recently down in Sindh at the opening of we broke ground on a new school. And we had 300 members of the community show up to help us do that. And when you go to see something like that, or you go to Jinnah Medical Center and you see the new OBGYN center that's there, and that's processing 450 women a day move through that. That plaque on the wall says a lot, and we know that people walk by that plaque with USAID on it every day. So we kind of feel that, we know that people appreciate the work that we do.
Why do you think you're viewed suspiciously sometimes?
Well, everybody can read the books about the Pakistan-U.S. relationship. So, it's possible to, obviously we're part of the U.S. government, so we can get linked to that. But I think that when people are a recipient of the work, that there's appreciation. I was here during 2006 during the earthquake. I was the head of emergencies, and I can tell you that when we would show up in places that probably hadn't seen an American for a while, we knew that there was a great appreciation. And I didn't feel that people were suspicious of what we were doing, and I don't feel that when I go out now, when I get out to see projects. Opened a hospital up in Jammu and Kashmir, Usaid, Jammu and Kashmir. And all I felt from the community was, thanks very much for doing this. So sure, there's always going to be, there are issues out there that perhaps make it difficult for people to differentiate between what we do and perhaps larger geopolitical issues. But on the other hand, it's getting down to that individual level. It's saying, hey, this school, this water, this hospital, we were glad that we could do this for you. We're glad that the U.S. taxpayer, we're glad that we could be your partner in this. And that's where it counts. That's really where it counts. And so I suspect for in the future we'll continue to have, I think we'll have a good relationship with the people of Pakistan, with our program, because I think it makes a big difference. And it's something that we can be proud of, and we hope that it's something that helps make a big difference in the relationship between Pakistan and the United States.
Well, thank you very much again for having taken out the time.
Thank you for having me.
For the interview. The reason I was particularly interested in this interview, as I mentioned when I started, was that when I mention USAID to some people, there's a lot of questions that arise, and there is a lot of positive work that is being done, as Gregory mentioned, but at the same time, it doesn't seem to have the kind of impact that they're trying to achieve. Maybe because there's not enough awareness, maybe because we don't know about it, maybe because, in a country which has so many needs and so much to be done that, a few billion cannot change the system overnight. But having said that, I always hope that Pakistan is headed towards a better, brighter, more prosperous future. Thank you for watching. See you next time.